A month on from its release on PlayStation 4, we get the classic Modern Warfare 2 campaign remastered on Xbox One consoles, completing a four-way comparison. As one of the most ambitious campaigns in Call of Duty's history, it certainly made a mark in 2009. Now of course we can play the original 360 version through Xbox One's back-compat support to improve the frame rate, but now a far more refined option is on the table. Developer Beanox's work on this remaster redoes texture work, lighting, and the post-effects suite in a way that respects the original vision while making it palatable for a modern day audience. It's an incredible effort. But is it the case that the base Xbox One delivers on these new visual features at a full 60 FPS, or are there cutbacks? And equally, does the enhanced X model get a visual upgrade this time, bearing in mind the remaster of the original Modern Warfare to this day runs using the same visual setup as the base model? Let's find out. The situation on Xbox One X is the most interesting here. Flashing back to the Call of Duty 4 remaster from 2016, the tragedy is this still hasn't received a proper X patch. There's no 4K support, visual effects, or anything over and above the base machine. The only advantage is residual, in that it takes the dynamic 1080p setup of that base machine and has the GPU horsepower to keep it rendering at a native 1920x1080 all of the time. That's unlike the image quality drops on the weaker machine. PS4 Pro always had the advantage of being a console that released in November 2016, the same month as that remaster, meaning it did get a boost, whereas X simply arrived too late to the party and there was no retroactive support for it. Hence the slightly muddier image when you're playing it today. While that's still the case to this day, the Modern Warfare 2 remaster at least delivers an upgrade.
Stay close and hug the wall.
The numbers speak for themselves. On the X model you get a native 2880x1620 resolution, or 75% on each axis. It's, as far as I've tested, completely fixed to that figure too, with no drops under during load. So yes, we have an upgrade in visual quality here, though really it's the exact same figure as the PS4 Pro version. Despite a gap in GPU power, 4.2 teraflops versus 6, there's no evidence of any tangible upgrade over the rivaling Sony machine, which I think is a shame. There's a sense, as you'll see later in the frame rate tests, there should be an overhead here that should allow for an even higher resolution on X, but no. 1620p will certainly take it, and the anti-aliasing, likely a post method as we see on PC, absolutely covers the lasting edges before it's scaled to 4K. It's a great looking picture, and with HDR support included too.
Target is a white 12-story apartment building. Over.
Switching over to the base model, predictably it's not as flattering. A native 1080p is what you get in the best case, but just like the previous 2016 remaster, it's a dynamic solution that wavers below that. Most shots in any major outdoor battle will settle at a lower figure, adjusting the horizontal axis as needed. So for example, this opening battle across the bridge is dense with AI, transparencies, and a huge draw distance, pushing the renderer down to 1404x1080. That's the lowest figure I've encountered so far, but potentially it could drop under. Equally, the Gulag level later in the game, with its dramatic flyover through smoke, really hammers the base Xbox One in image quality. Direct comparisons, as I'll tee up now, really bear this out. These side by side show the resolution divide up pretty well. Mostly the difference between dynamic 1080p and 1620p comes out in the distance. Fine sub-pixel detail like the meshing on fences turns practically invisible on the base model, simply because there aren't enough pixels to resolve it. That's ultimately the worst of it though. The comparisons also show texture filtering takes a nosedive in quality next to X, and just like the PS4 and PS4 Pro comparisons, there's also a minor drop off in shadow rendering. Expect more dithering on shadow outlines on base Xbox One, but beneath the lowered resolution it's pretty hard to notice. Otherwise you keep the suite of effects, the volumetric light as we run this corner, the smoke, and even the motion blur sampling is up to scratch between the two. Neither loses out, and crucially X does keep the same visual quality as Pro in every other regard. There's a lot to celebrate then. In the visual stakes, it's roughly what I'd expected going in. The only regret is, again, we don't see much of a boost on X's resolution compared to what it could have pushed. The Modern Warfare reboot, for example, commands an advantage on X purely for having a higher pixel count in most points. Having it target a higher resolution in this remaster and include a dynamic resolution setup could have extracted more visual detail per frame from the console in the long run, but fixing it to one number does simplify things. It's certainly a great looking game all round. In fact, the HDR implementation, just as with PS4 consoles, stands out in particular. A lot of the superb work by Beenox rebuilding the materials pays off here. Panning shots of the winter sun show more depth, and likewise for flames in the battles on home soil. It's a genuine showcase for HDR tech if you have a supporting TV, and that translates to Xbox machines too. All of which brings us right on to performance. The fact of the matter is we're getting the best performance on Xbox One X overall. There are some one-off hitches here and there, stutters as we play, partly I suspect down to the auto-saving system. But in general, there's a strong level of consistency here. 60 FPS from the opening shootout across the dam to the helicopter sweep past the gulag. A lot of that will come down to perhaps targeting equivalent settings to Pro. There's power going spare, and as a result, X clears up the drops Pro had in very rare spots, like this area if we flash back. There's very little to detract from the experience here. It's a rock solid rendition of the game. What if we turn to the base model next? Well, this is surprisingly strong all round. The use of dynamic 1080p gives it some wiggle room visually, which does help take the heat off the GPU in pushing a full 60 FPS. That's not to say it's perfect. Check out this flyover shot again across the gulag, with its spires covered with enemies and explosives galore. Again, it's here we see the resolution drop to some of its lowest points, and moving through the smoke pushes it well into the 50 FPS region. It's fleeting though, and really doesn't flare up during regular gameplay enough to detract. On balance, it's far more solid than I'd expected going in. I mean, let's take a step back. Considering the ambition of Modern Warfare 2's campaign had ramped up considerably next to the original, this really could have unstuck the base machine. There's more firepower on screen, it's more bombastic, over the top, and yet it's all kept reasonably in check. The pecking order between the consoles then isn't quite so clear cut. Both the Xbox machines have an adaptive VSync for a start, which means you'll see screen tearing during drops, especially the base machine, which wasn't on PS4 consoles. X will show a one-off tear every now and then, but nothing too glaring at all. All round though, it's still a step up over the Pro model in performance, which was already really good, and itself an improvement over the regular machine. The surprise is base Xbox One actually doesn't drop as much as the base PS4. If we flash back to this scene where we detonate a bunker, there's a significant drop here which is improved marginally on Xbox One. It's a sign that having a dynamic res and that adaptive VSync in particular helps soften the blow for these spikes in load. Still, it's much of a muchness. These are very short-lived hits to performance that right themselves pretty quickly. The collection is complete on console then, and that about wraps up a quick look at the Xbox One versions. Replaying this a month on from my first analysis, the absence of multiplayer is still very striking. Even Spec Ops would have been nice. It's definitely high on the wishlist for me, though it's likely Beenox is ready to move on to its next project, if it hasn't already. Could it be Black Ops, or something entirely outside the realm of Call of Duty remasters? Now the game's been out for a while, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on where the team could push themselves next, because despite their narrowing the scope on just the campaign mode, the quality of delivery is clearly here. And despite the delay, it's great to say this applies to both Xbox One machines too. That's all from me today though. Just a quick look here, but if you found it useful or insightful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get this video at high quality, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.